The OnePlus 8 and 8 Pro are here, bringing a number of major changes to the series, many of which users have been asking for quite some time. While the standard OnePlus 8 takes advantage of the new design, better cameras, and so on, the OnePlus 8 Pro is really the contender for the title of flagship killer. But it's also not cheap. At $900, the OnePlus 8 Pro is the most expensive OnePlus phone ever made. Sure, there are clear improvements that arguably warrant a higher price tag, but there are also plenty of other expensive phones out there that offer similar features. Is the OnePlus 8 Pro really the flagship killer, or is it just a flagship? I've been testing the phone to find out. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps support my work, and I would appreciate some of that support. The first thing to notice about the OnePlus 8 Pro is its design, and while it is reminiscent of previous generation OnePlus phones, there are some notable tweaks on the phone too. On the front of the device, for example, you'll get a slightly curved display around the edges of the phone, while the pop-up front-facing camera found on the last generation of Pro phones has been replaced with a punch hole cutout lens in the top right of the display. While it means there is something on the display, I think it's the right move. A mechanical part always adds complications, and the hole punch might have even helped the phone get its IP68 rating. Also, the front-facing camera is relatively small, and you'll barely notice it during day-to-day use. On the back of the phone, you'll get a vertically aligned camera module, which is raised quite a bit from the back of the device. It's actually raised to the point where you'd have to have a pretty thick case to make for a flat back, and if you're like me and don't love having cases in the first place, then you have to deal with a phone that wobbles a lot on a desk. It's not a huge deal, but it is something to note, and generally I want to see manufacturers start moving back towards flush cameras. The colours on offer are pretty nice too. The OnePlus 8 Pro is available in 3 colours: Onyx Black, Ultramarine Blue, and Glacial Green. I haven't seen the blue or black options in person, but the green looks great. On the right side of the phone, you'll get the volume rocker, while the left is where you'll find the power button and ringer switch. On the bottom of the device, there's the USB-C port and the SIM tray. Sorry guys, no headphone jack available here. The OnePlus 8 Pro is a little bigger than the OnePlus 8, and while I do like using large screen phones, it doesn't feel as snug in the hand as the standard OnePlus 8. It still feels good, to be sure, and I really like the trend of taller phones lately, but you'll have to reach quite a bit to get to the top of the phone, or use 2 hands. Truthfully, I would have liked a OnePlus 8 Pro in the size of a OnePlus 8, even if it meant sacrificing a little battery life. The display on the phone looks absolutely awesome. OnePlus has really ticked all the boxes here. There's a 1440p resolution with a 120Hz refresh rate, plus it's an AMOLED display, so blacks are deep and natural. The 120Hz refresh rate makes for a super smooth experience. If you've never used a display with a high refresh rate before, it's a bit hard to explain why it's better. It just is, and you can notice a difference. It's rare to get a phone display this good. Under the display, there's an optical fingerprint sensor. I wish OnePlus would have gone for an ultrasonic sensor here. The sensor is fine, but it's pretty slow and it regularly didn't recognize my fingerprint. A better sensor would have been especially appreciated given the fact that there's no secure facial recognition here, just the regular recognition through the front-facing camera, which I don't recommend using. When it comes to performance, the phone is pretty powerful. The device offers a Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 processor, coupled with either 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, or 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. In day-to-day use, the phone performed excellently. The phone is very responsive, loads things quickly, and handles multitasking with ease. Gaming on the phone was a good experience too. Benchmarks confirm the good performance. My model is the 8 gigs of RAM model, so it didn't quite perform as well as the 12GB OnePlus 8 that I tested, but it still achieved an Antutu score of 572,976, which beat out the LG V60, iPhone 11 Pro, and so on. On Geekbench 5, I got a single core score of 896 and a multi-core score of 3,353. It's slightly under the performance of the OnePlus 8 and LG V60, and seriously under the iPhone 11 Pro, but it beats the Pixel 4 and other last generation phones handily. Powering the phone is a 4,510 mAh battery, which was easily enough to get the phone through a full day of use, even heavy use. The battery even got me partway into the next day, and I kept the refresh rate at 120Hz. You'll get an even better battery life if you switch the phone to 60Hz, but I prefer keeping the smooth feeling, and considering the fact that I usually charge my phone at night anyway, the battery did perfectly fine. In my battery test, which involved streaming a 1080p YouTube video at full brightness for 3 hours, the phone performed better than the iPhone 11 Pro, OnePlus 7 Pro, and the Pixel 4, retaining 73% of the battery after the test. It didn't quite match the OnePlus 8 and it didn't come close to the LG V60, but it still performed pretty well. The OnePlus 8 Pro supports OnePlus's Warp Charge, but perhaps even cooler is the fact that it finally supports wireless charging. In classic OnePlus fashion, the wireless charging tech is better than most too. You'll get a 30-watt wireless warp charge, but only if you use OnePlus's special wireless charger, which even has a fan built into it to keep everything cool. Thankfully, the phone still supports Qi charging, so you can use other chargers. And you can use other phones with the OnePlus wireless charger, but they'll only support charging at 5 watts. The phone comes with a quad lens camera, with one 48 megapixel sensor, one 8 megapixel telephoto sensor, one 48 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, and one 5 megapixel filter sensor. Shots taken from the phone were actually pretty good and better than the standard OnePlus 8, though not really up to the quality of the iPhone 11 Pro or the Pixel 4. Colors are relatively bright while details are good. Perhaps the coolest feature is the Telephoto Lens, which allows for 3 times optical zoom and up to an impressive 30 times digital zoom. Sure, it's not as much as the 100 times zoom on the Galaxy S20 Ultra, but it's still far more than the vast majority of other phones out there. In low light, again, the phone performs fine, but just not up to what we expect from a flagship phone these days. As you can see, images from the iPhone 11 Pro and Google Pixel 4 are much brighter and more detailed in low light. The front-facing camera on the phone is good too, but again, not incredible. Generally, the camera on the OnePlus 8 Pro could be described as good, but not really competitive with the likes of the iPhone 11 Pro or Pixel 4. If the camera is really important to you, it's worth going for one of those other devices. The speakers in the OnePlus 8 Pro are pretty good, and they can get decently loud. They sound good too, and while they certainly don't match headphones or actual speakers, they're more than good enough for watching videos on the go. Here's a quick comparison of the speakers compared to others. While the sound is affected by things like the microphone and the speakers you're listening to this video on, at least you might be able to hear how the speakers compare with other phones. The software experience on OnePlus phones has always been pretty good, and it's even better on the OnePlus 8 series. OnePlus's Oxygen OS is relatively close to stock, save for things like OnePlus base apps and the clock and the gallery. Generally, these apps do the job, and while some might prefer the googly feel of stock apps, and most will want to use Google Photos instead of the OnePlus Gallery, Oxygen OS is generally great to use. Perhaps the biggest change to Oxygen OS for the OnePlus 8 series is the fact that OnePlus has finally replaced the OnePlus shelf with the Google feed. The OnePlus 8 Pro isn't just a great phone, it's easily one of the best out there. OnePlus phones have always come at a lower price, at the cost of lacking a few features. But the OnePlus 8 Pro doesn't lack any features. It offers excellent performance, a good battery life, a good software experience, a decent camera, an amazing screen, low-band 5G support, and more. Perhaps the only downside is the lack of millimeter wave 5G support, and maybe the fact that the curved display can make for accidental presses. But the result of all those awesome features is a high price tag. At $900, the phone is not cheap at all, but it is cheaper than comparable phones. Perhaps the best comparison is with the Samsung Galaxy S20, which starts at $1,000 or $100 more than the OnePlus 8 Pro. The 8 Pro offers advantages over other phones too. It has newer specifications compared to the Pixel 4, it has a better software experience and better camera than the LG V60, and so on. In other words, if you're looking for a flagship quality phone and don't want to spend the $1,000 that flagship phones seem to come at these days, then the OnePlus 8 Pro is simply the way to go. Or, if you don't mind having a slightly lower resolution display and no wireless charging, then you could go for the standard OnePlus 8 instead. Thanks again for watching, and again, please subscribe to this channel if you like this video. My name is Christian, and I'll see you next time. See ya.